then three minutes intro, and we'll go to the questions. Especially if you've played with that, then it will be really easy. So the AI agents is essentially a platform that you use to develop voice bots using the LLMs, right? You configure, you create the bot, and the prompt is the major part of it, and then you can choose between various LLMs. You can bring your own LLMs, show it in a second, and you can control the level of creativity, max number of tokens, and so on and so forth. You can equip agent with tools and documents. So when we are talking about the tools, there is a set of predefined tools like transfer call, dial DTMF, and so on and so forth, right? There are also, and you can also configure your own tools over here, which will essentially go into some APIs and bring you back the results from it. And so that can be used either to update external systems about something that happened during the conversation, or you can bring information from the external systems. And I think the simplest example of that, let me see if I have, that's our QA account. So the simplest example of that, for example, there is that find appointment tool, which uses the cal.com API to find the upcoming appointments, right? And there is also schedule appointment tool that is used for actually scheduling the appointment. And you have various kind of flexibility here, so you can use variables that are defined in the agent itself, and therefore you can easily update those variables instead of going to each and every tool. You can create headers like that, right? And you can create some fields which are not really visible to the LLM and are just part of the API that you're trying to build. And also, that's still not in production, but in the upcoming release, you will be able to use MCP, right? Instead of the REST APIs, and you will be able to use MCP server to pretty much do anything that you want.
And the tools under the hood is function calling from...
Right. Okay. Tools are essentially function calls done by the LLM, and then they're converted into the REST API or MCP client calls. Okay. Now, what else is there? So there are documents, right? Documents are for adding the information that LLM is not aware of at the learning time. You have various ways. So first of all, the documents are added over here, and you can either scrape some URLs, or you can upload the documents of PDF, Word, HTML, and so on.
We have our own vector database. We can use it as tool.
Yes, definitely. You can, instead of using documents, you can just use the tools to bring the data from the database. But if you decide to use documents instead, then you have control of the way the chunking is done. And the chunking is done on a pretty intelligent way that essentially converts every document into the markdown format, and then uses the structure of that markdown format to cut the document into the chunks that are not cutting in the middle of the sections, and the information is enriched with the actual structure of the document. So like you have not just the section in the middle, but also all the titles of the sections above it, so that LLM gets much better context. And when you are using the documents in the agent, it's slightly different UI, but it will be there soon, and the same thing is available in the old UI. So you can control how you are working with those documents. So there are two ways, which we call RAG, where essentially you are getting extracts from those documents based on the user query, and that can be either done for every query. You can let LLM decide when to do that, so it will essentially call the tool which will bring those chunks, and that's called doc search tool. Or you can bring the complete document. If you're talking about small documents where every line is extremely valuable, then you can either include them in prompts, or again, you can equip LLM with tool that will bring the complete documents or parts of the document if you are using the advanced mode. Okay, so that's about.
And I can override the search tool with our vector search.
You can implement your own search tool if you want. Yes, the custom tool can bring the data same way as that the data is coming from the documents, and you have pretty much like the complete control of, for example, whether the information that the tool brings remains in the message history or is redacted from it, right? Because if you're bringing large pieces, you don't want them to remain in the context and therefore fill in unneeded input tokens. Now there are multi-agents, okay? Multi-agents allow you to create various topologies where, let me try to show it on some example. For example, that thing. Okay, so that's a little bit not clear in that way. Let me add some. I'll delete it later. Okay, so think. Yeah, okay. So that thing. So there's that agent, which is a master agent. It starts the conversation, and then there are two sub-agents, Dr. Schedule and Dr. Cancel, right? And they're right below the main agent. If you go into the sub-agents, you'll see that they're over here, right? Now, the idea is that if you are talking about relatively complex tasks, then if you try to describe all the possibilities in a single prompt, you are getting both too long and therefore too expensive prompt, and you're also probably will cause LLM hallucinations simply because of the length of the prompt. So if you can split your task into like your business requirements into separate tasks, and you can create agent doing some specific task, then you create topologies like, for example, that Dr. Main example is the example of the clinic where the doctor main is kind of a person answering the call. Its responsibility is to collect some basic information about who is calling and what is his intention, right? And then if he intends to schedule appointment, then he passes control of the call to the doctor schedule agent that is doing the scheduling. And if it's cancellation, then it's passing the control to the cancellation agent that is doing the cancellation, right? And you can scale it as much as you want. Now, there are multiple ways in which those agents can collaborate. So one way is to just pass control, right? Like I've asked, the Dr. Main asked what's the username and what's the user social security number, and then it's just passing the control. The conversation continues in the doctor schedule agent. Another option is in that Hogwarts main example where the sub-agents are in the consult mode, right? Consult means that the question or some message is sent to the sub-agent. Sub-agent generates the response. It may take some a few turns, for example, to call the tools if it needs, but whatever. Once the response is generated by the sub-agent, it goes back to the main agent, and main agent handles the next utterance, right? And in that case, for example, like there is like a kind of a router that categorizes the messages, and if they're about the courses, it passes the utterance to the classes agent, and if it's about finances, it passes the utterance to the finance agent. But again, every utterance is handled by that main agent, and it again decides where to route the next utterance to.
Okay, it is a little bit nicer for the flow. Okay, and what's your recommendation?
It really depends on what you are trying to achieve. Like if the trade-off is between like. If, for example, I'll give you an example, like not that thing, because that's probably not real life, but let's say you are in the hotel and you're trying to handle different user requests, okay? And there are like lots of categories of user requests.
Yeah.
So you probably want a main agent who is handling the utterance, categorizing it, passing it to the agent to do something about the utterance. But next utterance needs to again be handled by the main router, because you cannot you assume that user may first ask to bring something into his room and then ask what are the pool opening hours, right? And they're in the different knowledge domains. So in that case, you will be using consult mode, and all the utterances will be handled by like first level agent, right? If on the other hand you're talking about like an example of that doctor appointment, then once user expressed his intent to schedule the appointment, the conversation needs to continue in the scope of the scheduling agent, right? There's no need for the conversation to pass through the main agent, because you've identified the intent of the user, and then you continue the conversation with multiple utterances and responses in the context of the schedule agent, and therefore you will be using the delegate mode, right?
For example, I talked to the I have a booking agent, so and I talked to the bot and asked for a booking, and he put me to the booking agent. So
Right.
this is his own agent, not a consult, because it's a really complex task with some tools. Okay.
Right, you'll probably be using Delegate in that case, because you want that agent to be able to talk with user without actually going, like there's no need for, again, to go all the routing path. You've already the right agent, it's continuing talking to user. And another, so there's another trick there. So when you configure the delegate mode, there is regular delegate and there is delegate with history, right? And the idea is that in the regular delegate mode, every agent has its own message history, and that has advantages. Like, for example, like if you have the booking agent and I don't know, information agent, then there is no need for information agent to know what has been talked with the booking agent, because it will just confuse him, right? Like there will be some messages in the history completely irrelevant to its own prompt. But there are some cases where, like, you want the message history to be shared. Because maybe in that message history there was some information that can be used by another agent to make the conclusion. For example, like there are some cases where, for example, you start talking with user may provide some information about him, then it gets to the booking agent. If the message history would be shared, booking agent would be able to access that information that was collected before him, right?
Yeah, for me, it's a default, because if I ask, hey, I need the room next week on Monday, I won't delegate with history to the booking agent, because he needs this information.
You have two options. So one option is there are two orchestration tools, right? One is called the pass question, another is called send message. So pass question just passes user utterance as is to another agent. Send message formulates the text that is sent to the other agent. And so, for example, in the Dr. Main scenario, you will see that when the main agent finishes its job, it sends a message with all the information that it gathered to the doctor schedule agent. So you can pass the information not through the message history, but through that message that you are exchanging in between agents. And again, it's a trade-off. It really depends on the use case and of what you're trying to achieve, and on how complicated your prompts are and how confused they may be about by the answers not provided by the prompt itself. Because there's the trade-off is that in the message history there will be some utterances and responses not generated by the actual prompt. Yes. In most cases that's fine. In some cases it may be confusing for the LM.
But if we had a complex process like the booking flow, and then the agent asks, I don't know, 10 questions about how the room let's look like and so on.
Right.
But after that, the booking is finished. then the user, for example, wants to know the opening hours from the pool.
Great.
So how we can then go back to the main and switch to the, I don't know, spare agent or whatever.
You need to teach that agent that was talking with the user about the booking that it needs to realize that the booking process is over.
Yeah.
And then he needs to pass user utterance to the main routing agent, and it will route it to the new agent.
Okay, but this is something we put in the prompt. So
right.
If the booking is finished and the user asks whatever, send it to another agent.
Exactly.
Okay, and then we can use the consulting mode for the agent that is not confusing.
Yeah, I mean, again, consulting mode is for use case where there's main agent, sub agents doing handling utterance, providing response, and then everything goes back to the main agent, right? So it's like one-shot response. In your case, like the relation between, like information agent is a perfect example for something that consult mode would probably work great with it, right? Because it's it answers the question, most probably the answer is complete. If not, it will provide the continuation, but in most cases it's complete. But booking is typically delegate.
Okay, but after a delegate mode, we can switch or set it in the prompt that we want to go back to the main agent. And then
yeah, definitely. Okay, now, so that's about the multiple agents. You have something which is called post-call analysis, which is a simple idea that at the end of the call, you may run some prompts that will either summarize the conversation or extract data from the conversation, and all that data can be either pushed through the webhooks to the external system or can be accessible through the RESTful APIs on LiveHub itself.
The whole transcript with some details.
Right. So you can also send a transcript through using the post-call analysis. But let me see, for example, what is here, right? So that's, for example, something that not just sends the transcript, but it actually extracts the data from it, right? So that's an appointment reminder, and then there are some meaningful parameters that you analyze the conversation, and then you just feel that those parameters extracted from the data of the conversation. So you can see it as a performance evaluation metrics, or you can generate just executive summary of the call, or whatever you want. You have an LLM and you can extract data using it, and that's like the rest is
also possible only to get the transcript with some
the input
data.
is the transcript, and the output is whatever you define, right? You have the prompt, you can define whatever the output should be, and it can be either text or the extracted JSON. Okay. And it can be a different modal if you want, right? And that's, I forgot to say, but that's sometimes important that you, like for multi-agent deployments, you can choose what modal each agent uses. So you don't necessarily need to use, 4.0 Mini for everything. You can sometimes switch to Gemini, or some tasks maybe can make it 4.0 or 4.1 or whatever. And yeah, I think that's pretty much it. Now, all that is on top of the LiveHub. So you have all the properties of the bot connection, right? And where you can choose different STT, TTS providers, languages, Bargin, DTMF, and whatever you want. And also, there is that link that is not really very accessible. We need to improve on that, but there is a change log. So we're constantly kind of developing that, and so there is a change log, and there are quite a lot of like advanced configuration parameters that are in there. And in the current version in production, it's done through the variables, but it's not like it's a little bit uncomfortable to use it that way. In the next version, it will be done through the much more easier, like a JSON editor, like you have in the bot connection. without tooltips and autocomplete and so on and so forth. And so you can do all kind of like hidden stuff, like you can define webhooks pretty much for everything, right? As you see here. Beginning of the conversation, user utterance, response, whatever you want. You can return back programmatic information, like define variables dynamically, or you can trigger tools, define which documents that the agent has access to, and so on and so forth. There are various ways, for example, to, based on the language detected, transition to the specific agent, right? In the beginning of the conversation. Like if you have multi-agent system and user can speak in, I don't know, German and Hebrew, and English, then based on detected language, you can pass that conversation immediately to the agent specializing in the specific language, and so on and so forth. There are quite a lot of like some of those small tweaks that actually make the development and the user experience much better.